They assumed they were picking up just another suspect matching a vague description. But when he appeared in court the following day, wearing a tailored suit instead of handcuffs, they realized they had made one of the gravest mistakes of their careers. It was a little past 900 a.m. when dispatch relayed the alert black male, mid-30s, navy blue jacket, suspected of breaking into a vehicle on Madison Avenue. Officers Brent Halcroft and Lynn Mercer were already driving down that very street, coffees in hand, half tuned in. They exchanged a knowing look, like it was routine. "There," Brent said, gesturing with his chin toward a man outside Grange Bakehouse, one of Boyce's busiest morning spots. The man stood calmly, scrolling through his phone with a pastry bag in his other hand. He loosely matched the description. That was enough. Brent pulled the car over quickly. No sirens, no flashing lights. Lynn stepped out before the car had even fully stopped. "Hey! Hands where I can see them," she yelled. The man, Kenton Miro, looked up, surprised but composed. "I'm sorry. You resemble a suspect." "Stay still," Brent said, advancing with one hand near his weapon. "I'm standing outside a bakery," Kenton replied, confused. "Waiting for my driver." Lynn scoffed. "We'll clear it up at the station." Before Kenton could respond, Brent seized his arm and turned him around. "No, you're resisting," he said loudly for the onlookers. Phones came out. Eyes were watching. Kenton didn't fight. He stayed silent as they cuffed him. Lynn sneered. "They always get quiet when the cuffs come out. Probably just another guy with a fake resume and a fancy story." Brent added with a laugh. No one read Kenton his rights. They didn't check ID, ignore the receipt in his bag, or even glance at his phone. They tossed him into the patrol car and drove off, already cracking jokes about the paperwork. Inside the vehicle, Kenton stared straight ahead. "You got anything to say?" Brent asked from the front. "I'd like my phone call," Kenton said calmly. Brent rolled his eyes. "After booking." But Kenton's even, measured voice, so unaffected, started to unnerve them. Not enough to stop, but enough for Brent to glance again in the rearview mirror. Kenton didn't look scared. He looked prepared. And he definitely wasn't finished. Booking moved slowly at the station. Rob Tesh, the desk officer, blinked when Kenton was brought in. "You sure about this one?" he asked. Brent dismissed him. "Matches the call. Suspected car prowler. He was hanging around." Kenton spoke quietly. "I was waiting outside a bakery." With a receipt, Lennon stepped up. "You questioning field judgment now, Tesh." Rob hesitated, frowned, but entered the data. Then something caught his eye. He paused. "This address? I'd like my call now," Kenton said again, politely. Brent raised a brow. "Gonna ring your lawyer buddy?" "No," Kenton replied. "The Attorney General's office." Brent laughed. "Right. Be sure to say hi for us." They walked off, still joking, but Rob Tesh wasn't laughing. He was already heading to a private office, dialing a secure line. Meanwhile, Kenton made his call. No searching, no scrolling. He knew the number. "This is Morrow," he said. "Boise PD, Madison Avenue. I'll need full documentation by this afternoon." The click. No outburst, no dramatics. Just a clean, surgical call under 30 seconds. That was all it took. Later that day, a discreet message landed in the police chief's inbox from the State Department of Civil Oversight. Immediate release requested for Kenton L. Morrow. Attached e-credentials, official records, federal profiles, and a notification of an audit under Article 14 of the Law Enforcement Integrity Act. It wasn't from a defense attorney. It was from the AG's liaison. Kenton was released in under an hour. Brent saw him again in the hallway, not behind bars, not escorted, just walking calmly alongside two state officials in suits. Brent squinted like he'd seen a ghost. "That's not possible." Lynn scowled. "What the hell is going on?" At the front desk, Rob Tesh typed something into a system Brent and Lynn couldn't access. He said nothing. Kenton didn't look back. No smirk, no words. Just the same deliberate walk he'd had all along. And the silence he left in his wake hit harder than any siren. That evening, Brent complained to his brother over dinner about political favoritism and people with pull. Lynn sipped a beer on her porch, telling her girlfriend it was probably a paperwork mix-up. She was sure he'd end up with a charge anyway. Nobody that smooth isn't hiding something. But as days passed, whispers spread through the precinct. Someone mentioned Kenton's name during a meeting. 2 sergeants exchanged glances. Another officer said he used to work in Oakland and was high up in some oversight group. Even Captain Rolstad seemed shaken, guarded, unusually cautious when Kenton's name came up. That's when Brent started to worry. If leadership was nervous, something real was going on. Lynn shrugged. We had the call. We followed protocol. We've got body cam footage and logs. Brent nodded, but it didn't feel right. His gut told him they'd missed something. Kenton wasn't what they expected. And the way he left. Quiet, dignified. That's not how the guilty act. They went back to their routine, but the story was already running ahead of them. Because by the time they felt the ground shift beneath their feet, Kenton was already standing above them, watching it all unfold. The boys' courthouse wasn't grand. Just stone steps, glass doors, and the echo of shoes in empty halls. Brent and Lynn entered together, walking side by side, both sharply dressed, crisp blue uniforms, polished badges, expressions set. Just another day on the job. They'd been in court so many times it barely registered anymore. The charge was straightforward, interfering with an investigation into a stolen car. They figured Kenton would roll in late, probably lawyered up, maybe trying to stir up drama. But he wasn't outside, not in the lobby, not even listed on the court schedule like you'd expect a defendant to be. As they passed through the security gate, a bailiff met them with a formal nod. You're both set to testify in courtroom 2C, he said. Brent responded, Yeah, Halcroft and Mercer. This is the Myro case, right? The bailiff hesitated. Morrow isn't the one on trial. Brent's brow furrowed. What was that? The bailiff just gestured. You'll find out. Inside courtroom 2C, something felt off. Not chaotic, just wrong. The room wasn't filled with anxious defendants or tired attorneys. Instead, reporters lined the back, cameras were set up, and someone from the city council was present. Brent's shoulders tensed as his gaze found the front of the room. There, at the table near the judge, sat Kenton Morrow. No handcuffs, no attorney at his side, just calmly flipping through a binder, dressed in a dark, tailored suit. The placard in front of him read, Special Counsel for Civil Accountability, State of Idaho. Lynn leaned in. What is this? Brent muttered back, no idea. This wasn't in the briefing. The judge called the session to order. This hearing pertains to a procedural review of an arrest made recently on Madison Avenue, she said. Mystery, Morrow will be advising as a representative of the state's Civil Accountability Office. Lynn's jaw tightened. Brent looked stunned, like someone had blindsided him. Kenton never glanced their way. He just sat there as the judge addressed them. Officers Halcroft and Mercer, please come forward. They approached stiffly, their confidence slipping. Every pair of eyes was locked onto them, but not with respect, with judgment. Please explain the reasoning behind your decision to detain Mr. Morrow, the judge requested. Brent cleared his throat. We responded to a call. Suspect was described as a black male wearing a navy jacket. The individual had no criminal history. The judge cut in. No prior contact with your department. Was identification verified before you detained him? Lynn responded. He matched the description and didn't comply with commands. Kenton still didn't look up, but he clicked his pen, slow and purposeful. The judge turned to him. Mr. Morrow, do you have any input? For the first time, Kenton met their eyes. In my work, he said steadily, I've reviewed countless reports that start the same way. Broad descriptions, unchecked biases. Over time, those stories form a pattern, and a badge doesn't erase the consequences of that pattern. Lynn moved to speak, but Kenton raised a finger. Not to her, to the judge. I request we delay direct testimony. An internal investigation has been approved. A formal hearing will take place in 2 weeks. The room went silent. The judge nodded. Request granted. Brent and Lynn said nothing as they stepped back, numb. Kenton shut his binder, stood, and left without a word. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. But the weight of his presence lingered. And as he exited, the media trailed behind him. Brent's hands trembled. Lynn whispered, "What is going on?" But both already had an answer. That wasn't just a legal setback. That was the opening play, and Kenton had just changed the game. Before Boise, before the title and the tailored suit, Kenton Morrow was just another kid, trying to stay invisible in Bakersfield, California. His mom, Deirdre Miro, worked overnight shifts at Mercy Hospital. His dad, when he was around, painted houses and left little more than smoke and silence in his wake. By 12, Kenton had already mastered the art of switching between two worlds. One where he excelled in spelling bees and science fairs, and one where he kept his head down when police cruisers passed. He was quiet, never showy, but always observant. In 8th grade, a teacher accused him of stealing a calculator. No one else was questioned. His locker was searched. They found nothing. He stayed silent, but never forgot how quickly suspicion could land on him. It wasn't anger that fueled him. It was recognition of the pattern. At 17, he earned a scholarship to UC Davis, majoring in political science and writing essays that cut straight through the noise. He didn't raise his voice. He presented facts that silenced rooms. Law school followed. Stanford. He got there on merit, not favors. While others chased firms and salaries, Kenton interned with the Public Accountability Office in Alameda County. He sat through testimony about routine stops that left people battered. He documented everything. He didn't wear fury as armor. He wore discipline like a blade. By 33, Kenton led investigations at the Western District's Office of Civil Conduct. Quietly, case after case, he built a name, not the loud kind, but one that made departments uneasy. He thought like an analyst, moved like a lawyer, and carried the calm certainty of someone who already knew the truth. Boise was his first role as special counsel, a position created after years of pressure from watchdog organizations tired of internal affairs investigating their own. Kenton was chosen carefully, approved discreetly, and kept out of the spotlight by design. No social media, no speeches, just presence. And that morning outside the bakery, it wasn't the first time he'd been profiled, but it was the first time it happened after he'd been appointed. That changed everything. Because for once, he didn't need to file a complaint. He was the complaint. And it wasn't revenge he was after. That role was far too minor for the work he was really doing. He wanted facts documented. He wanted recurring issues brought to light. He wanted departments to know they were under scrutiny, and not just from inside the system. After the incident, he didn't reach out to the press. He contacted a judge. Then he called the Office of Personnel Audits. His credentials weren't metallic. They were legislative. That gave him the power to request documents, access records, and reopen long dormant cases. That's what had Brent and Lynn uneasy. This wasn't about a single mistaken arrest. It was about the bigger picture. Because Kenton wasn't just some attorney who got cuffed by mistake. He was the one individual in the state with both the access and the drive to dig into their entire history. And he didn't need to shout to make it happen. The station felt different. Not louder. Not more hectic. Just tense. Brent Howcroft was the first to pick up on it. When he stepped into the break room and conversations immediately ended. Not like someone had interrupted a joke, but like people were afraid of saying something they'd regret. He opened the fridge, grabbed his lunch, and pretended not to notice. But he knew something had shifted. Lynn Mercer sensed it later that day. She passed a conference room and caught sight of Lieutenant Schaffer, speaking quietly with two suited individuals. Neither wore department IDs. One carried a leather portfolio, the type federal agents usually carry. She slowed down, hoping to catch a name. They stopped speaking the moment she came into view. That night, Brent got a call from his cousin, a fellow officer over in Twin Falls. "Hey, did you arrest a guy named Moreau last week?" his cousin asked. Brent's stomach turned. "Why? His name's blowing up. State Audit Board? Some oversight agency. Everyone here's watching like they're next to be investigated." Brent let out a short, uneasy laugh. "No big deal. Just a mix-up. Guy got mouthy. We settled it." But even to his own ears, the lie was shaky. 2 days later, the captain summoned them. It wasn't informal. No, drop by when you have a second. This was official, full uniform, paperwork. Inside the captain's office sat the same two people from the hallway. Officers Halcroft, Mercer. Captain Rolstad said curtly, "Meet Mr. Granger and Ms. Osai from the Office of Civil Accountability." Ms. Osai didn't offer a smile. She barely blinked. "We are initiating a formal review regarding the events of last Thursday morning involving Mr. Kenton Miro." Brent's expression froze. "We've already dealt with that. He was released. Case was dropped. That's the end of it." Granger interjected. "This review goes beyond the arrest." Lynn sat up straighter. "I'm sorry. What does that mean?" "We're looking into your complete history, complaints, traffic stops, submitted reports, and revisions made afterward." Captain Rolstad shifted in his seat, then pushed a manila folder toward them. "You'll be subpoenaed to attend the review hearing 2 weeks from now." Brent opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Lynn swallowed. "Are we being accused of misconduct?" "Not officially," Granger said. "That's what the hearing will determine." The following morning, both officers received an email. Subject Case Review Summary, compiled by Special Counsel K. Morrow. The attachments were extensive, old stops, body cam time codes, civilian statements. Pieces they never thought anyone would fit together. Brent hovered over his keyboard for nearly a minute before opening one file. A stop from 3 years prior. Julian York. Pulled over for a broken tail light. Held for failure to comply. Charges later dropped. No body cam footage uploaded. York's statement said he was slammed against his car after asking for a supervisor. Brent vaguely remembered it. Not every detail. Just enough. He closed the file, heart pounding. Lynn messaged him. "Lynn, they're going to make it look like a pattern." "Brent, it is a pattern." There was a pause. "Lynn and we followed protocol." Even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Because Kenton wasn't bringing just one complaint. He had documentation. And Brent and Lynn were realizing this wasn't damage control. It was an autopsy. The review hearing wasn't held at the station or courthouse. It took place in a neutral city building off Fairview Avenue, the kind of place normally used for zoning boards or public utilities meetings. But that day, every seat in the gray, plain room buzzed with tension. Brent Halcroft adjusted his tie repeatedly before entering. Lynn Mercer sat outside flipping through a slim folder, though she hadn't absorbed anything on the pages. They weren't alone. Around the table sat at least a dozen individuals. Legal advisors, someone from the city's ethics committee, 2 representatives from the state attorney's office. No uniforms, no friendly faces, no allies. At the head sat Kenton Morrow. He didn't look angry. That might have been easier. He looked ready. Beside him was Ms. Osai. She began in a flat, formal tone. "This hearing is being conducted under Article 14. Officers Halcroft and Mercer are present. The allegations pertain to abuse of discretionary authority and repeated misuse of procedural stops." She turned to Kenton. "Special Counsel Morrow, the floor is yours." Kenton didn't raise his voice. He didn't lean in. He just opened his folder. "This isn't about individual claims," he said. It's about consistent behavior. He laid a document on the table. Case 1, Julian York. Stopped for a broken tail light. Detained for 45 minutes. No charges filed. Body cam footage missing from report. Lynn cleared her throat. That incident happened 3 years back. Kenton didn't even glance up. Second case, Alan Rivers. Fit the profile of a robbery suspect. Same station, same wording in the report. Also detained without proper justification. No formal charges filed. He slid another document forward. Third case. Same officers. Same language, matched the description. Acting suspiciously uncooperative tone. Brent leaned in. We respond to dispatches as they come. We don't create the descriptions. But you decide how long someone gets held. Kenton said evenly. You decide whether you verify IDs or ask questions before making assumptions. You choose your tone, your words, and how often someone with no criminal background walks away injured and never gets an apology. He pulled out a map with red pins stuck across it. These mark every stop the two of you have made in the last 5 years. The pins didn't appear random. They clustered. On certain roads, in specific parts of town. We compared your activity with 3 other patrol units. Kenton went on. You conduct 42% more stops. 8 out of 10 involve members of one specific demographic. And in 90% of cases, no charges are ever filed. Imazosai added softly. That's not law enforcement. That's profiling. Lynn's voice rose slightly. So now we're being punished for doing our jobs. For answering calls. For following department procedures. You're not being prosecuted, Kenton replied, calm as ever. You're being reviewed. A review that started because, for once, you picked the wrong person. Not someone easy to dismiss. Not someone without resources. Me. He let the words settle for a beat. That day, I wasn't anyone important, no badge. Just a man standing outside a bakery. And you decided that was enough? Brent exhaled through his nose. We got a dispatch. It wasn't personal. You didn't need it to be, Kenton said. Because the system you operate in does the targeting for you. He looked around the room, then fixed his eyes on the 2 officers. You can't repair what you won't admit is broken. No one responded. The silence wasn't triumphant. It was clinical. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about exposure. And in that stillness, every cut corner, every half-written report, every ignored civilian complaint resurfaced. Because when you make the same call again and again, it stops being a mistake. It becomes your identity. By the second day of the review, Brent Howcroft was unraveling. He entered the room looking aged, his eyes dim, jaw clenched, posture stiff. He hardly spoke to Lynn, barely acknowledged her. Lynn seemed composed, or was at least putting on a front. The usual defiance was there, but her eyes betrayed something else. She was watching everyone too carefully. Kenton Morrow didn't bring outrage. He brought testimony. One by one. People took the floor. Julian York, the man pulled over for the tail light, told his story. How he asked for a supervisor and left with a sprained wrist. How his complaint went unanswered. No follow-up. Just silence. Ellen Rivers, mistaken for a robbery suspect while carrying groceries home. Described being tackled in front of her child. Her daughter didn't speak for days afterward. Brent shifted uncomfortably during that account. There were others. Not all showed, but those who didn't yell or accuse. They just shared what had happened. That made it worse. Because Brent and Lynn couldn't pick apart testimonies that were simple. Honest. Human. Lynn crossed her arms tightly. We've seen people at their worst. We can't afford to hesitate when things line up. Kenton didn't respond right away. He studied her. Like someone looking for the weak point in a structure. Maybe the problem is what you define as lining up. He said at last. Brent's voice wavered. You don't know what it's like out there. People lie. They threaten you. They run. It changes how you read situations. Kenton nodded slightly. I won't pretend your job is easy. But when the same kinds of faces keep suffering for other people's crimes, it stops being about safety. It starts being about familiarity. Familiarity, Lynn said with a bitter laugh. Yes, Kenton said. The ease of relying on assumptions. The comfort of never being the one face down on the pavement. Brent's shoulders slumped a little. Then Mizuse opened another folder. 3 separate reports within the last 2 years indicate tampered or missing body cam footage. One video was marked as corrupted. Another wasn't submitted at all. Brent looked up slowly, his voice heavy. That's a tech issue. That's out of our hands. Kenton stayed composed. It wasn't on you the first time. Or maybe even the second. But now we're at 4. For once, Lynn had no comeback. The weight of evidence, reports, footage, patterns, was pushing back in ways they weren't used to. They'd always felt protected. Untouchable. But now that protection was full of cracks. And Kenton wasn't here to destroy it. He was simply shining a light. One of the panel members leaned forward, a former officer herself. Do either of you recognize that your actions may have caused harm? Lynn looked at her, then down at the table, and said quietly, We've always done what we were trained to do. The words lingered in the air. Kenton's reply was quiet. Then maybe it's time we train people differently. Because once you admit the cracks, you can't keep pretending the wall is still solid. Well, the final day of the hearing didn't open with drama. No loud gavels, no shouting. Just the faint rustle of paper and the quiet weight of people who understood things were wrapping up, and that not everyone would leave unchanged. Brent and Lynn sat side by side, still in their uniforms. But the way they carried themselves was different. Brent had stopped trying to justify. He sat silent. Lynn had her arms tightly crossed, gaze fixed forward, lips pressed together. No longer smug, just stiff. Kenton Marrow stepped forward and moved to the center of the room. He wasn't backed by lawyers or spectacle. Just him and a slightly worn folder. He placed it on the table with care. I've said what needed saying, he began. You've heard from those who were affected. You've seen the data. Read the reports. Watch the footage we managed to recover. Notice the repeated language. The recurring tactics. The same people being stopped, questioned, restrained, then quietly let go. He glanced at Brent. I don't think either of you joined this department to cause harm, but at some point, you stopped checking yourselves. You stopped seeing individuals and started seeing categories. No one responded. I'm not here to destroy your careers. That's not justice. I'm here because if the system keeps shielding practices that clearly don't work, nothing gets better. He looked to the panel. My formal recommendation, he said firmly, is that officers Halcroft and Mercer be reassigned away from fieldwork indefinitely. They should undergo retraining, psychological evaluation, and their department should face a full audit. I'm also recommending the flagged cases be officially reopened. Brent didn't react. He looked down, expecting it. Lynn mumbled under her breath. The verdict and what followed, it was just a job, she said. Kenton turned toward her. No, it was a responsibility. And when that's forgotten, people get hurt. The board stepped out for deliberation. 5 minutes later, they returned. Brent Halcroft suspended from duty. Badge removed, pending reassessment. Lynn Mercer, same outcome. They said nothing as the verdict was delivered. No protests, no exit theatrics. Just 2 officers who had assumed for too long that rank meant immunity from scrutiny. Kenton gathered his things quietly. As he passed Brent, he stopped. Brent met his eyes, just briefly. I didn't think it would come to this, Brent said. It didn't have to. Kenton replied. But that wasn't my decision to make. Then he walked out without another word. That night, Brent cleaned out his locker. Alone. Lynn never showed up. Rumor had it she'd taken leave. No one contacted her. The same colleagues who once toasted them at promotion dinners and holiday parties were suddenly unavailable. The station had begun to glance over its own shoulder. A new poster went up outside the squad room. Civil Accountability Hotline. Confidential. A few new officers stared at it a little too long. And Kenton. He was on a plane to Coeur d'Alene the next morning. A different city. Another department. Another quiet review. That was the job. It wasn't about making headlines. It was about correcting structure, seeking truth, building lasting change. He didn't need applause. He just needed the wall to stop hiding the cracks. Because if no one's watching those in charge, the cycle never ends. Now, at least someone was. 2 months later, Boys was still adjusting. Most media outlets had moved on. No viral footage. No mass protests. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. And those paying attention could feel it. Kenton Morrow didn't stay behind. He never did. His role was transitional. City to city, case to case. He never stuck around long enough to become the focus. He wasn't searching for credit or a spotlight. He just believed that accountability should apply to everyone. Not just those without power. But what he left behind didn't fade with his departure. The Boys Precinct's training manual got revised. Not in sweeping ways, but enough to matter. Officers were now required to review real footage. Not staged clips of mishandled stops. Kenton's investigation became one of the training examples. New recruit orientation began asking a different kind of question. Have you ever made a mistake? And what did you learn from it? Not to shame, but to see if someone could own their actions before earning a badge. Brent Halcroft took a quiet job with the city's vehicle impound office. No badge, no gun, just a desk. He never brought up the hearing, never claimed he'd been wronged. Some said he was bitter. Others thought maybe, finally, he was listening. Lynn Mercer didn't come back. Word was, she moved to Wyoming to be near family. She deactivated her online accounts. Declined every interview. She didn't challenge the board's findings, but she never publicly accepted them, either. And for the people who'd been stopped, searched, humiliated without cause, some received apologies. Not all, but a few. Julian York got a handwritten note from the mayor's office. Eileen Rivers received a call from the city attorney, asking if she'd consider mediation. No press releases. No flashy settlements. But quiet signs that something had left a mark. That was the part most people missed. Justice doesn't always explode. Sometimes it whispers. It listens. It presses someone in power to explain themselves. And maybe next time, someone hesitates before treating a man in a navy coat like a suspect before a person. Because that morning outside the bakery could have happened to anyone. But it happened to Kenton Morrow, a man who spent his career watching people be silenced. And when it was his turn, he didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He held up a mirror. And this time, they had to look. The takeaway wasn't that Brent and Lynn were villains or even outliers. The real message, how easy it is to stop seeing others as human, and how dangerous it becomes when that mindset carries a badge. But maybe, just maybe, someone in that department, some new officer with polished boots and a clean slate, remembers that next time a vague description comes through, maybe they pause, ask a question, check a name before cuffing a wrist. Maybe that's enough to spare one life, or more. Because change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it leaves a hearing room with a worn folder full of names, and makes sure it doesn't happen again. Final notes he calls call to action. If stories like this matter to you, if you think truth should challenge us enough to change, subscribe to this channel. Every story brings us closer to understanding. Let's not look away when it counts.